I've seen buyers fall in love with homes only to be heartbroken because of one of these 10 deal breakers. So today we're going to talk about the 10 deal breakers that come up in an inspection report that you need to be aware of and how to deal with them. Number one is foundation and structural issues. Now, we have seen things like sinkholes and loamy soil, which is pretty common through parts of Florida, but sometimes, especially with an older home, you're going to see foundational issues that stem from years and years and years of settling. And so we just had a home recently that I helped a first-time home buyer get into, and it was a home built in the 20s, and this home listed on one side in the back of the property. And so this was going to require jacking that portion of the home up and leveling everything underneath out. Now, you would think that this would probably stop a deal from going through. And under normal circumstances, it could. But we were able to get the deal through. We were able to kind of work everything out. The buyers knew what they were dealing with. They had a family member who was pretty good at dealing with construction issues. And so their family member was going to take care of it for them. In some circumstances, that would be a huge issue. In this one, it wasn't. But you have to really be careful about that. Now, as far as sinkholes go, sinkholes can pop up anywhere where the water table has receded far enough that the ground above the water table collapses. And so if you're looking at a house that has a sinkhole, it could possibly be remediated, and the insurance company for the seller might be able to remediate it, and it may not cost you anything. The problem is twofold. Number one, if it has a sinkhole and it's remediated, the stigma attached to that lowers your value. Okay. And number two, if the insurance company doesn't cover it, it can be over $100,000 because what they're doing and fixing that underneath the house is they're pouring a ton of concrete. I don't even know how many cubic yards of concrete they have to pour in, but I know that it's a lot. Okay. And so when they pour that concrete in, they re-level the house, and that's a lot of work. It's a lot of money. And so you want to make sure that if there's any issues with the foundation, with the loamy soil and settling. Now, bear in mind, okay, and I just want to make sure you understand this. Settling in Florida is normal. It doesn't matter whether it's a brand new home or home that was built in 1910. Settling is normal. You're going to see some settling on a house, and you're going to see little cracks sometimes in the walls. You're going to see little cracks in parts of the foundation. That is actually okay. Okay? You don't want those cracks to go unrepaired. So what you would want to do is you would want to put some sealant and paint over those so that there's no way that moisture can get into those cracks and cause more problems. But settling in Florida is just part of Florida. We have very loamy soil, and we have, that kind of situation pops up pretty much on a regular basis. So as far as this goes, the main thing you're concerned about is there a settling issue, or is it a foundation issue, or is it worse? You have the ability during the inspection period to request or to pay for yourself, if the seller won't do it, an engineering report. So you can have a company come out. It's expensive, but they can come out and they can test the soil. They can, use all of their instruments to probe down deep underneath the house and determine whether there's going to be an issue for you. Most of the time, that's not necessary. So that's number one: foundation, sinkholes, excessive settling. Those things you need to look at. Now, number two is major roof issues. Probably 7 years ago, 5 to 7 years ago, most insurance companies were okay if the roof was within 5 years of its wear life. So if the roof was a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old roof, and it had another 5 years left, that was okay. You could go ahead and purchase the home. You could get insurance on it, get that insurance bound, not a big deal. Now they're asking for 10 years because they have found that those roofs that are not up to snuff, when we have really bad hurricanes or bad wind conditions, they can really, take a lot of damage, and that damage has to be paid for by insurance. And so the insurance companies have kind of like poo-pooed all of that. Now, the main thing you want to look at is, do you have the money to repair or replace a roof? If you don't have the money to do it and the seller is not willing to do it, then that presents a problem. And so there's a few ways to get past that. Number one, you can offer more and then ask for a credit going towards the roof. But if you're buying the house with financing and the house doesn't appraise because now you've put it above appraised value, then the deal's going to fall apart. So these are some things that you want to consider when it comes to a house that maybe has a roof issue. Now, there are some things that can be done, and I would think that the listing agent would understand this enough to do it. I've done it before. I've had roofers that I work with that will go out and put a roof on prior to listing the house to make sure that the house is in the best condition possible. And then they will take the money out of what they get for the house, pay the roofer, and be done with it. Some agents don't know to do that, and some sellers don't understand the potential benefits of doing that. So when it comes to roofing problems, you really need to be able to negotiate through that or walk away. If you have a really bad roof and the seller is just backed up against the wall, they have no place to go financially, they can't pay for it, and you're worried, or your agent's worried that maybe the house isn't going to appraise if you pay a little bit more to get that roof taken care of, you're better off just finding another home. Because that could really end up costing you. And you can figure that a roof now is probably going to be somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 on an average home, $17,000 and above on a larger home. And so we want to make sure that when we're looking at homes, we understand that a roof can be a major consideration, and having a brand new roof or having a roof that's well within its wear life is essential to getting that deal done. So number 3 is going to be wiring problems, electrical problems. Now this can be anything from bare wires, like we had one customer that purchased a home that had been completely renovated. The home was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, but they never went into the crawl space, and when the inspector went up there, what he found was bare wire touching insulation, which is a huge fire hazard. Now, those kinds of things, we can go up to the seller and say, hey, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, this is the situation. It needs to be fixed before we end up taking ownership of the house and going through all of this. It's going to be up to the seller to determine whether or not they have the finances to be able to repair it for us, or whether they want to give us a credit or take money off the house and we repair it ourselves. Bearing in mind that in the state of Florida, every home is sold as is with the right to inspect. Basically, that means that the seller is not legally obliged or obligated to repair anything. The home is being sold as is. Now, if you're a really good buyer, and if you have really good finances and the seller sees that they are locked in with a strong buyer that's going to be able to go all the way to the end of the process and close on the home, more than likely, they're going to help you. They're going to do something. Now, I've seen sellers like that seller repair all the wiring. They cost them $1,500 to do it, but they did it because they knew that they had a really strong buyer. I've also seen sellers replace whole wiring panels, so the breaker panel, because the breaker panel was a problem that the inspector found. I've also seen sellers lower the price or give a repair credit. All of those things are possible, but you want to make sure that when you're looking at an inspection report It's those types of things, especially the electrical things, that are very important that you want to be watching out for. Now, if you're seeing things like light bulbs that don't work, or anything like that, that's just stuff that the inspectors put in there as a, oh, by the way, but it's not something that's so detrimental that it's going to cause you not to want to buy the house. So that's something for you to consider as well. So number 4 is going to be plumbing problems. Plumbing problems can really, really catch you at the wrong time. Personally, with a house that I sold a few years ago, I heard water running in the laundry room, and I could not figure out what was going on. I called one of my handymen, and he's like, hey, look, grab a hammer, go outside, listen for where the water's running, and break the block. And as soon as I did that, water comes gushing out. Turns out that we had a pinhole leak in a galvanized pipe that was running through the block. That pinhole leak caused water to just, fill up where that block was, and that's what I heard running. Now, my guy was able to come out and fix it that day, which I was so thankful for. But, it still cost money, and it still ended up with me having to break through the block and do all of that to figure out what was going on. You don't want to have to do that. So when the inspection report comes back and he says that he has taken his meter, which is a meter that gives him an idea of how much moisture there is. Maybe it's in the foundation, maybe it's along a wall or up in the ceiling. You want to pay attention to that. And so if there's any kind of polybutylene piping that may need to be replaced, you're going to need to, talk to the seller about that, or have your agent talk to the seller about that, negotiate that for you. Sometimes people have already replaced all the pipes, the galvanized pipe, with PVC pipe, which is fantastic. Now, if you have to make a deal and get repair, let's say you have to get a repair credit and you're afraid of what it's going to cost you, bear in mind, if you have to replace the plumbing, all of the plumbing, because let's say it's all galvanized or polybutylene, which you don't really want in your home, there are ways to do it that keep you from spending a ton of money. Okay. And so if you go to a plumber and say, I just want you to do whatever you need to do, they're probably going to tell you that they need to take the foundation of the house, rip it open, get all the pipe out, and relay pipe. That is the most expensive way to do this. But depending on the type of house you have, there are other ways. They can do it if you have an older home that has space between the floor and the ground outside. They can rerun the pipe from underneath the house. If you have a more modern home that's on a slab, they can run the pipes outside the house on, how can I put this, the bottom of the exterior walls. They can run pipe around the house that way, and then up into certain sections of the crawl space, and then down into like the bathroom or the kitchen or whatever. And so that's going to cost you a whole lot less money than, ripping up everything inside your house, ripping out all the flooring and doing. Please, there's so many different ways that this can be done to where you don't have to spend that kind of money. Now, when it comes to negotiating with the seller, that's going to depend on the seller situation. It's going to depend on what the house would appraise for. And again, it's going to depend on whether or not the seller has their back against the wall. They may not have the financial ability to drop the price. They may not have the financial ability to pay for, fixing it. But if you're well within where you need to be as far as your offer goes, you could come up and then kind of like put that all into, or roll that all into your loan. It's not the best, but it's one way of dealing with it. And so just remember that when it comes to dealing with plumbing issues, and I'm not talking like, the sink leaks or the faucet leaks or, little things that can be done by a handyman. I'm talking about big plumbing issues. I'm talking about issues that would require major renovating. There are ways to save money in doing that. You may not need to just say no, but then again, you might. If you don't feel like you can deal with those types of repairs, in other words, you don't feel like you really want to go through that process and not knowing how much it's going to cost at first, you may end up having to pay more, then don't. You're better off going out looking for another house. You have to do what you feel comfortable with. Some people are okay with tackling stuff like that, others aren't. But you have to make sure that you feel comfortable and confident that you can tackle a situation like that. Even if you're getting the best deal possible on the house, that could actually turn it into a nightmare. So that's all I'm going to say there. Number 5 is termites. Now, let's just bear in mind one thing. Termites destroy wood, but so does carpenter ants, or so do carpenter ants, I should say. So does mold, mildew, and fungus. All of those things together are what we refer to as wood-destroying organisms. So whether it's carpenter ants, termites, boll weevils, mold, mildew, fungus, whatever it is, those things all destroy wood. And there's wood in pretty much every house, whether it's a concrete block home or whether it's a wood frame home. There's wood in pretty much every house. Even in manufactured homes, there's wood. And so those things we need to make sure of. So having a wood destroying organisms inspection, which is different most of the time than having a 4-point, which is the normal inspection that you would get that would cover the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, and the AC. That's pretty much essential. You need to know whether or not these things are in that house. Now, when the inspector comes back with a report, he's going to tell you whether there's mold, mildew, fungus, whether there's carpenter ants, whether there's termites. But bear in mind, pretty much every home in the state of Florida is going to have some mold. Every home in the state of Florida is going to have carpenter ants at some point. Maybe not all the time, but at some point you're gonna find them, especially during the rainy season when they're looking for someplace that's high and dry. You'll find them trying to figure out ways to get into your house. And termites are pretty common. Termites are pretty common all the way around Florida. Now, it used to be back when I was a kid that the only way to deal with termites was to tent the house. That's not the case anymore. When it comes to subterranean termites, they usually use a stake that has poison in it, and they put the stakes all the way around the house. And the subterranean termites, of course, subterranean means that they live underground. They will go to those stakes, eat that, bring that back to the queen, and kill the hive. That's cool. Thing that most people don't understand is that if you look up or do some research in your area for do-it-yourself pest control, okay, you can buy everything that you need and do it yourself for half the price, if not less. That's just the truth. And so having a termite company come out is going to cost you probably over $1,000. Doing it yourself may cost you a few hundred. So think about that. Now, when it comes to things like mold and mildew, we have mold, like black mold, that can either be really benign or really seriously bad. The difference is how it affects you when you breathe. So sometimes people are very much allergic or sensitive to mold, whether it's orange mold, black mold, whatever. And then other people really, have no issues with it. You don't want a home that has a lot of mold. So if your inspector is telling you, man, there's mold all the way through the back of the walls, remediation for that mold is very expensive. It usually means having to seal off those areas and then having guys come in, tear all of the wood, tear all of the sheetrock, and pull everything out, hit it with chemicals, kill all the mold, and then eventually get all of that debris out so that you're not breathing it. And then, you can go back in and have all of the sheetrock put up and, any wood that was destroyed put up. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. So if you're seeing a little bit of mold in the bathroom, if you're seeing a little bit of mold in the kitchen, that's usually okay. That's not a big deal. But if you're seeing black mold on the walls, if you're seeing black mold on the baseboards, when you walk through a house, you're probably going to end up with a bad report when the inspector comes out to take a look at it. So you need to be really aware of that. If you're worried about mold, I would suggest you do a little research because, like I said, in Florida, we have very humid temperatures, and that humidity is what mold thrives off of. If that house has had a bad roof for a long time and that roof has been leaking down into the walls, you're probably going to end up with a mold situation. If you don't see yourself being able to handle that in terms of, I don't want to deal with this, I'm afraid of it, doesn't make me feel comfortable, and I don't want to spend the money on it, then don't. Find another house. You're better off. Now, if you see very little, or if your inspector sees very little evidence of mold and the inspection report shows that the mold that's there is easily dealt with, then it's not a big deal. So don't overplay this. Mold is everywhere in Florida. It's just part of living in Florida. So don't get freaked out by it. Just know that there are grades of mold. When you see mold everywhere on the walls, you know that that's going to be a major issue. When you see a little bit of mold here and a little bit of mold there, that's something that can be dealt with. And I'm sure your inspector would be able to help you with that. All right, so you're looking at buying an older home, okay? A home that was built before 1978. And that home maybe has asbestos shingles on the outside, or maybe it has lead paint. Yes, those are hazards. Asbestos can cause cancer. Lead can cause all kinds of health issues and brain issues, and we know all of that. But here's what we need to understand about older homes, whether it's asbestos shingles or whether it's lead-based paint. Most of the time, unless those things are damaged, like the paint is peeling or the asbestos shingles are cracked and falling off, you can paint right over the lead-based paint and be fine. You can paint right over the asbestos shingles and be fine. The problem you run into is when, especially with asbestos, the problem you run into is that when you snap them or try to take them off and damage them, the dust that comes from the asbestos is what will get into somebody's lungs and cause cancer. So the way that we handle this in terms of buying a home is if the house, for its age, is in good repair, there's no cracking on the asbestos shingles, there's no fraying where you're getting dust from it, and it's all been painted over, then, if you want to buy that older home, you're probably going to be fine, and the inspector will tell you that. If you're looking at lead paint on a house and it's flaking off and they haven't painted it in a long time, just know that you may have to paint that house if they can't do it themselves. But that doesn't mean you can't buy the house. Now, are there that many homes that have asbestos or lead paint? Yeah, because we have a lot of homes built from the 1900s on up to 1978 when they stopped all of that. And so, if you're looking for, especially if you're looking for homes in a certain price range, you're looking for like seriously affordable homes, you're going to find that. You're going to find asbestos in some cases. You're going to find lead-based paint in others. That's pretty normal. And so don't freak out about it. Just know that as long as the home is otherwise in good repair and those shingles, as far as asbestos shingles go, are not damaged, painting over them in the future is not going to be a big issue. As long as the house itself is in good repair, painting over lead-based paint is not going to cause problems, and you're not going to end up getting sick from it from either one of those because it's sealed off. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, let's say you're wanting to put siding on a house that has asbestos shingles over or asbestos siding. That's going to be an issue because when the guys go to drill the braces for the siding, they're going to have to drill into asbestos, and that's going to cause problems. So you want to think, like when you're looking at that house, you want to think in terms of, okay, what do I want to do with this house in the future? Am I okay to leave the house the way that it is, paint over everything, and I'm good to go? Am I wanting to make it more modern? Am I wanting to do a lot of renovation to it? In that case, maybe that house isn't going to be the best for you because it's going to be a lot more expensive to deal with that because of the hazard that asbestos produces for you. Now, on the other hand, it's a lot easier to deal with lead because lead is only an issue if it's ingested or if you have it on your skin for long periods of time. Drilling into the side of a lead-based, or a lead-based house, or a house with lead-based paint, I should say. Drilling into the side of that house is not going to be as big of an issue as an asbestos house. And so they'd be able to do siding and do all of that stuff, and it's not going to cost you a ton of money. For the asbestos house, it probably would. It probably cost you a ton of money. So just be thinking about that. When you're looking at a home, especially an old home, think about, what is it going to take to get this house to where I want it? And is it going to be something that's going to put me way over my budget or put me in a situation where I don't really feel comfortable with dealing with it? All right, number 8 is HVAC systems or air conditioning. In the state of Florida, air conditioning is not optional. It's essential. When the temperatures get over 95, 98 degrees, especially if you're in a concrete block home and there's not a lot of cross ventilation, your house can become sweltering in no time, especially without AC. So, knowing what to look for in your inspection report when it comes to your air conditioner is pretty crucial. Now, when it comes to AC problems, the biggest problem that we run into is old ACs, so ACs that have not been replaced. Now, I'm not saying that a 10 or 15-year-old AC can't still be running and in good condition, but the older they get, the more things can go wrong. And if they haven't been well maintained, or if parts haven't been replaced over time, eventually stuff is going to go out and the AC is going to fail, and then you're going to be stuck. So when you're looking at the inspection report, make sure that you understand that the inspector, and again, I've said this in other segments of this video, the inspector is a generalist, he's not a specialist. If you really feel like you need an extra set of eyes from somebody who deals with HVAC all the time, then you want to get a separate inspection by a professional HVAC person, an AC person, that's going to be able to tell you whether or not there's an issue or whether or not that older AC is going to be something that'll just kind of crap out on you. Now, we've seen situations where, like I had one customer that had a warranty on the AC. They had a warranty on the home. They asked for the seller for a home warranty, and the seller bought one. That's fine. That's fantastic. But it's only as good as the fine print. And so what ended up happening was a couple of weeks after they purchased the home, the AC went out. Well, it was $75 to get somebody out there from the home warranty company to look at everything. And when they did, all of a sudden, they kind of brought up in the fine print, well, because the AC is older than X, whatever it was in the contract, we can only prorate. So they gave my couple $1,000, and my couple had to come up with another $5,000 to be able to fix everything, or at least to be able to replace everything. So my point here is, old ACs can work well for you. Sometimes they can't. Bearing in mind that, again, all homes in the state of Florida sold as is with the right to inspect, which means that there is no motivation really for a seller to replace the AC if it's old and functioning. Now, if it's not functioning, they're going to have to replace it or repair it. They don't necessarily have to replace it. They can just repair it. But if it's functioning, then there's no impetus for them to say, oh yeah, I'm going to spend an additional $5,000 or $6,000 or give you $5,000 or $6,000 off the cost of the house. Everything kind of works through that whole as is with the right to inspect. So if you're really afraid of the AC and you don't want to spend the money, you may have to look for a different home. I keep saying that over and over again, but you have to be realistic about these things. This is all a negotiation between buyer and seller. And at some point, somebody's going to have to give a little bit, probably on both sides. So when it comes to the AC, the main thing you want to look at is, do you feel confident that that AC is going to continue to function properly over time? And are you going to have the money to either repair it or replace it when the time comes? And if not, go look for another house. It's not that big of a deal. You may love the house you're looking at, but if that's a kind of a non-negotiable, then you need to move on. Okay, let's move on. So number 9 is septic. Septic tanks in the state of Florida are pretty common. You're going to find them all over the state. You're going to find them in, close in town neighborhoods. You're going to find them out in rural neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods, whatever the case may be. Septic tanks are normally going to last almost forever as long as the house is standing, if they're well maintained. Now, well maintained is going to mean nobody's flushing grease down the sink, nobody's flushing wipes or feminine hygiene products down the toilet. The yard around the septic tank and around the leach field doesn't have like a ton of oak trees where the roots are getting into the leach field or they're digging in through the septic tank and causing problems. Now, when you purchase a home with a septic system, you need to understand how that system works. And basically, waste goes into a tank and bacteria eats at that waste. The sediment stays on the bottom where the bacteria is, but the effluent, which is the liquid, rises to the top as you flush and continue to pour water into the system, and it goes out through the leach field and leaches into the ground, which becomes fertilizer for the yard, basically. Now, what ends up happening is if there's grease that's been flushed over time, and let's just call this a rental situation where you're buying a home that had been a rental for a while and you don't really know how it's been taken care of. If there's been a lot of grease that has over time been poured down the sink and into the pipes, you may find that the pipe going out into the septic system has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller as far as where things can go through because the grease has, built up. It's almost like your arteries building up. That's going to cause a problem. And if that grease doesn't get out of there, if you don't clean all of that out, you're going to end up with a backed up septic system, which means you now have effluent coming in to your shower and to your toilets. So that's one issue. The other issue is when you get into a septic system, you have to keep it cleaned out every once in a while. Now, depending on how many people live in the house and depending on the system itself, that may be every 2 or 3 years. It may be every 5 years or so. It just kind of depends. When I was single, put it this way, when I was single and I had my house, I had a septic system. I don't think in the 25 or 30 years that I lived in that house, I don't think I ever had it taken care of, had it flushed out more than maybe twice. And that was because I was a single guy. I wasn't flushing any kind of wipes down the toilet. And with me by myself in that house for like 20 years before I got married, and even after I got married, I never had an issue. Now, there are some people that are really worried about septic systems. Septic systems are pretty foolproof. They've been used for a long time. The biggest issues that I have seen have been, again, putting things in the septic system that really shouldn't go in there, and roots. When you look at a leach field or you look at an area around where the tank is, if you've got a lot of heavy roots from like oak trees and whatnot, they can actually go through the leach field, get into the piping or into the baffles, and cause a lot of problems. They can cause the leach field to fail. When you're looking at the tank itself, these tanks last forever unless something happens to them. And roots, believe it or not, can push against that tank to the point that they crack it. And then at that point, it has to be replaced. So the only advice that I can give you is if you're looking at a house with a septic tank and you're worried about it, let's say, for example, you see some signs. There's a lot of tree roots around where the leach field is. There's a lot of tree roots around where the tank is. Or maybe you see some signs from the inside of the house that show you that maybe there's some issues, or your inspection report comes up with some issues. Have an independent inspection done of the septic system by a septic professional. That's the best way to go. Now, it may end up costing you money. It may end up costing you $350 for them to go and suck all of the stuff out of the tank, and then look at the tank, make sure that it's in good repair, check the leach field, all of that. It would be worth it, even though you're spending more money at the onset and you don't really know if this house is going to work and if you're going to be able to go to closing with it. It would be worth it to save you, probably anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to replace the whole septic system. That's going to be a whole lot more money. So, if you're not sure, always look at an independent, inspection to make sure that you're looking at doing the right thing. Now, there are ways to deal with this in terms of negotiating with the seller, or if it has to be replaced, maybe, getting the seller to come up with half. But again, they don't have to do anything. And so you want to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, if you feel confident, or if you feel comfortable that everything seems to be okay, your inspector has given you a pretty clean report, septic systems are fine. You're not going to have an issue with them for, as long as you own the house, as long as you're taking good care of them. So that's my spin on septic systems. All right, now we're at number 10. Number 10 is interesting because it's one of those things that doesn't happen that often. But when it does, it can present some pretty serious problems, and that's unpermitted work. So you've got a seller who has had that house for 15, 20 years, whatever the case may be, and maybe they had a back porch that wasn't screened in, or they had a screened-in back porch, and they got their cousin George to come in and turn that into an additional room, okay? It wasn't permitted, though. So we don't know how Cousin George did the job. We don't know if he did a good job, if he did a bad job, if it's up to code, if it's not up to code. And that's where we run into insurance issues, because without that permitting showing that it was up to code, the insurance is going to be hard to get. Now, there are ways around that. If the inspection report comes back and just says it's unpermitted, but it looks like it's been done properly, then you can always talk to the city, the county, and have an inspection done and see if you can get that permit updated. That sometimes plays out, sometimes it doesn't. The thing to remember is older homes had a lot of those kinds of situations, but bear in mind that homes built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s, people back then knew how to do stuff. So Uncle George probably knew what he was doing. If your inspection report comes back and it's kind of hinky, then maybe Uncle George wasn't that great at what he was doing. But if your inspection report comes back and it looks like the work was done well, but it just wasn't permitted, you can still get around that if you like the house enough. It's never something that is a solid no. It's always, do we need more information? Do we need to get somebody out here to take a better look? Do we need to go through a couple of hoops to get this, taken care of so that we can move on to closing. It all depends on how the job was done in terms of permitting. There are things that can be done, and I'll give you an example. I had one house that I was selling that the owner, for whatever the reason, he had done non-permitted work. He had enclosed a back section that was originally like a screened-in back porch. On the outside, he put stucco, and he did not do a very good job. So by the time we were looking at selling the house, the stucco had started to crack, and some of it had fallen off, and you can kind of see behind it. And we had a couple of buyers that came in, totally freaked out about the whole unpermitted work thing, and decided not to buy the house. Now, I knew that the work was unpermitted, but I also knew that aside from the stucco, everything else had been done correctly. So we found a buyer that loved the house, didn't care about the unpermitted work. We were able to get somebody from the county to come out and take a look at it. We repaired the stucco and ended up getting the permit squared away and moving on to closing, and it wasn't a big deal. Again, all of this is dependent on you and on how you feel comfortable with that situation and on how you can move forward with that seller. In my case, the seller was willing to make the repairs and to deal with the permitting and pay for everything so that we could move forward. Some sellers aren't willing to do that, and they really don't have the motivation because of the whole as is with the right to inspect situation. So when it comes to unpermitted work, you need to really make sure you know what you're dealing with. And if you need to have a second set of eyes, then go ahead and do that. It may be a little bit more expensive for you. It goes outside of the scope of the regular inspection, but it's probably going to behoove you. Someplace else in Central Florida, make sure you give me a call. All my information is in the description below. You can call me, you can email me, or if you'd like to set up a Zoom with me, you can just go to talkwithvince.com, get on my schedule, and we'll spend a half an hour, whatever it takes on the phone, answer any questions you have, determine what's going to be the best way for you to be able to approach your goals. It doesn't matter whether it's today, next week, or next year. The main thing is we want to come up with a plan for whatever your appropriate time frame is. I'm not going to look at trying to get you into my time frame because I have a ton of people that I'm working with, but I want to make sure that you're well taken care of and that your questions are answered and that we have a plan that works through your time frame so that when you're ready to go out and make that move, we've gotten all of our ducks in a row and we're ready to go. So all my information is here. Give me a call or, again, go to talkwithvince.com and I'll look forward to hearing from you. Thanks and hope you enjoy the video.